Welcome to our fourth AA podcast for the spring 2021 semester, the show where we explore the accounting world one asset and liability at a time. My name is Teodric, and I am here again with Caroline and Lon Ann. Also joining us today is the Vice President of the Accounting Association, Gohar. Today, we're going to be talking about Meet the Firms and how you as students can prepare for the event. The topics we will be going over as requested by our latest Instagram poll are how to stand out in a virtual setting, what to include in your elevator pitch, recruiting for roles outside of tax and audit, and how to keep in contact with professionals after Meet the Firms. With that said, I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Gohar.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm so excited. Well, hi everyone. I'm Gohar Hayrapetyan. As they mentioned, I'm Accounting Association's Vice President for Spring 2021. I am majoring in accounting and finance and hoping to graduate Spring 2022. Currently, as it's been mentioned a few times, I'm Vice President right now, but I have taken on many roles in the past few semesters. I've been Executive Admin, Evening Meetings Director, and our Mentorship Director too.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today, Gohar. Now we will move on to talk about Meet the Firms. The purpose of Meet the Firms is to give students a chance to talk with professionals in the accounting field in order to create social contacts with the prospective employers. The end goal of this event is to help accounting students land an internship or full-time opportunity with a future employer. So, Gohar, could you tell us more about Meet the Firms, such as when it is, who is eligible to attend, and how to attend the event?
Well, Meet the Firms, one good thing about it this semester, at least that I didn't get to experience, there are some pros and cons with the virtual setting of the event. I feel like one pro of the whole thing is that it is split up. So back when I attended Meet the Firms and I was recruiting, the event was held all together and all of the firms, whether it was government, whether it was local and mid-tier and big four, everybody came together and it was one huge event. But given that things are virtual now, it is split up into 3 different events, which is a great plus because it does kind of give you some time to relax and take a breather before you prepare for your other events. So it is split up into 3 different events. It is the first one coming up is February 16th, the big four and the mid-tier Meet the Firms. The next one after that is going to be February 24th, which is the regional and local firms. And then March 4th is our last Meet the Firms, which is for corporate and government. I would recommend, if you do have the ability, attend all 3 of them because they will all provide you with unique opportunities that you might not even know about. In terms of who is fit to attend or who is eligible to attend, anybody, if you're willing to put in the time, if you're willing to put in the effort, is able to attend, especially now that the event is free, which is again is another pro because back then we used to buy tickets to attend Meet the Firms and now you can just sign up for your slots, go and speak and make some amazing connections. Another plus of the virtual Meet the Firms is in person when you would attend Meet the Firms, there would always be long lines to speak to specific professionals and you would have to get into a huddle and just wait for your turn and that wastes a lot of time. But with the virtual Meet the Firms, you do have the opportunity to sign up for specific slots beforehand through Handshake. So make sure to have all of your accounts set up. Make sure that you check all of that with Stuart. And then once you have a go, make sure that you sign up for these slots ahead of time because this gives you the ability to sign up for the professionals you're interested in speaking. So you know who you're speaking to, you know when you're speaking to them. This gives you time to do some research and actually have a meaningful conversation with individuals. I would have to say Meet the Firms is definitely an amazing networking event because it helps individuals like me and individuals like you, or just people that don't really know what they're looking for or don't really know what they see themselves in, in the next few years. It helps these people connect with people who have been through what we are currently going through. So it helps you figure out step by step by meeting the right people. And attending events like this is definitely going to help you meet those right people. Because if you're just, especially now things that are virtual, if you're just sitting behind the screen, just attending your classes, trust me, you're not really getting much help because once you graduate, then you're going to be thinking, okay, now that I'm done and I have my degree, what am I supposed to be doing? So attending things like this throughout while you're still going to school will be very helpful to you, even if you don't really have an end goal of like landing a job or even thinking of gaining any experience or any of that. It's still beneficial to everyone.
Thanks for sharing, Gohar. That is very useful information for students planning on attending the event. As Gohar said, this event is free and open to all accounting, IS, and finance majors, so be sure to take advantage of this opportunity. Next, preparing for the Meet the Firms event is also very important. If you want to make a good first impression with the employers, you have to plan ahead the interaction you want to have with professionals. Gohar, can you advise our viewers on what should be included in an elevator pitch, and furthermore, how to stand out in a virtual setting? For our listeners, this is very important information, so be sure to take note of what Gohar is about to share.
I feel like personally speaking to different people, people have different expectations of what an elevator pitch is supposed to be. And if you speak to different people that are meant to hear the elevator pitch, they have different expectations also. So I would say, think of yourself, think of your brand, which is a repetitive thing you will hear when you talk to professionals from firms. They'll always tell you to think about your own brand, your own branding, how you see yourself, and talk about that. So personally, how I see myself and how I see my brand is, depending on my goals. So what I personally include in my elevator pitch is I start off with talking about how I am where I am. I talk about how I got into accounting, how I find it very intriguing, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. And I also mention some of my goals. I mentioned maybe like one or two goals that the person that I'm speaking to can help me achieve. That's also very important because you don't want to just say some random facts and just leave and walk away. You want your elevator pitch to somehow connect with the individual that you're speaking to. That's also another important thing because depending on that, your elevator pitch can actually change depending on who you're speaking to. Rather than having one set thing and saying the same exact repetitive thing to every single person you meet, it would be important to have maybe some sort of base when you talk about yourself, but the rest of your elevator pitch, be able to adjust it to depending on who you're speaking to, and that will be a big plus because you will stand out. In a virtual format, it can be hard for people to stand out given that we are all sitting behind a screen. I would say that would be a lot easier when we were in person because you're able, you're making eye contact, it's easier to read body language when you're in person. So it is a lot easier to make a connection and it's a lot easier to stand out. But there are still some things you can do virtually to stand out and be remembered. A lot of professionals and a lot of people just in general really expect to have genuine conversations. So when you are attending networking events and you are speaking to people, make sure that it is actual genuine conversations. Don't be there asking all these questions just because you think they sound like amazing questions that you found them off, Google, but ask questions that you're actually interested in learning more about. Ask questions that you've already done research about. Ask genuine questions about the person so they know that you're putting in effort to try to get to know them as an individual. I feel like asking things like this, maybe even trying to make a connection, maybe outside of the work world, maybe trying to make a connection about, personal interests. Those are all things you can do to come off a bit genuine. And trust me, when a person walks away from a conversation knowing that, okay, this was actually a valuable, genuine conversation I just had with this individual, they will have a better chance of remembering the person than if they were to just walk away from a person that asked the same exact questions they've been hearing for the past 3 hours from everybody that found it online. So try your best to make that connection because it will go a long way. One thing I would have to say about Meet the Firms is just because it's virtual doesn't mean you shouldn't still go all the way. I would still recommend for everybody to dress up. And when I say dress to impress, I don't mean just, shoulders up. Just because that's all everybody sees doesn't mean that's all you should be dressing up for. I would recommend fully dressing up. Ladies, put on some heels. Men, do whatever you like. Do whatever makes you feel confident. Because I know personally when I'm dressed up and I stand in front of a mirror and I look at myself, you get this boost of confidence. And it really, again, that also goes a long way when you're sitting and you're nervous and you're in an uncomfortable situation. So dress to impress, stand in front of a mirror, have that talk with yourself and motivate yourself and tell yourself that there's really nothing much to it. You can do it. And then turn your camera on, have a clean, neat background. That's an important thing. And I would say as long as you have the clean background, you are dressed to impress and you have that confidence, that's all it takes. But another thing I would add is also your posture. Make sure you're sitting maybe on a chair or maybe you have a pillow behind your back if you're on your bed and you have nowhere else to sit in your room. Make sure that you have that posture because posture is another thing that can really help with your confidence. At least these are the things that I do. Posture and dress for success really boost that confidence up.
Awesome. Thank you for all the info, Gohar. That is very useful information to take note of when preparing for Meet the Firms.
I agree, Teochik. Now, with that said, Gohar, would you say that students should consider recruiting for roles outside of tax and audit, such as consulting or advisory?
I would highly encourage everyone to explore every single opportunity they've ever been interested in before settling for anything. In my family, with all of my mentors, anybody that I've ever looked up to has always taught me to never limit myself. And I feel like that's an important thing to keep in mind for all of us, because you are working very hard for a degree. And just because you do have that degree and there's a set plan or there's a set career for it, doesn't mean you really have to settle for it. And honestly speaking, an accounting degree, there's so much you can do with it. There are so many opportunities connected to the accounting degree that we are getting from CSUN. As I said, it's important to not limit yourself. It's important to do your research, ask questions, ask to get connected to people you're interested in learning more about. Tax and audit are great career paths, but they might not be for everyone. Just because I think I'm set for audit and just because someone else might be going into tax or someone else might be going into consulting, that doesn't mean those are your only options. There's always so many options with any degree. So as long as you're willing to put in the work outside of your classes and do some extra research, you can do anything. Just again, research is like the number one thing on your list, and it should be the number one thing on your list. Figure out, try to ask all these questions, try to speak to the right people, try to go to the right websites, try to figure out what you're interested in. At some point, maybe even turn off your computer and turn off your screen and just sit there with yourself and think, okay, where do I see myself? What am I seeing myself doing? Think about what you want your everyday to look like within the next, 5 years. What is your full-time job going to look like?
Thank you so much for sharing, Goha. That was a question that I'm positive most accounting students here at CSUN were curious about. So, Teochik, with all the advice shared, would you like to share with us how your experience was last semester participating in the first virtual Meet the Firms?
Of course. So I personally found attending the virtual Meet the Firms event last semester easier than prior semesters. This is because we were given information on Handshake on which specific professionals would be attending weeks in advance. So it was much easier, in my opinion, preparing and deciding who to pick a time to speak with, especially if I knew the professional I wanted to talk to. And if I didn't know any of the professionals at a firm I wanted to recruit with, I just looked them up on LinkedIn to learn more about them prior to the event, which was the biggest upside, I would say, for a virtual Meet the Firms. Last semester was actually my first time doing heavy recruiting. So during the first day, which only involved Big Four and mid-tier firms, I had about, I believe, 8 or 9 individual time sessions with different professionals, which lasted about 10 minutes each per professional. If I remember correctly, I took a 10-minute break between each time session, and I personally felt the conversations went more smooth in a virtual setting because even though they weren't face-to-face conversations, it was better for me because it was just me and the professional talking, and we didn't have to worry about being talked over by many people surrounding us and having to speak loudly, which uh, was very common before Meet the Firms became a virtual event. With all that said, I would say it went really well. I really enjoyed the conversations I had with the professionals I spoke with and learning about their experience and the accounting profession.
Thank you, Teochik. And how about you, Caroline? Is there any experience you would like to add on?
So the first time I went to Meet the Firms was in fall 2019, and then again in spring 2020, and in fall 2020. So it wasn't until fall 2020 that the event was moved to a virtual platform. I went to both the Big Four and mid-tier Meet the Firms and regional and local Meet the Firms. And as Gohar mentioned, I split up so that there's only one Meet the Firms event each week. So you get the chance to speak with as many professionals as possible without having to cram them all in one night. For my Meet the Firm with Big Four and mid-tier, I signed up for as many slots as I could while also trying to give myself about 3 breaks throughout the event. And the convos are back to back, and there's only about a 2 to 5 minute break in between each. So it's important to give yourself these breaks because you might burn out and even start to lose interest in the event. and just use those breaks to kind of regroup, try and take some notes of the conversations you've had so far, and you can include those details in your thank you emails. And I think, as Gohar mentioned, fully dressing up for the event really helped me. Usually I'm kind of lazy about getting into my professional attire, and I just wear pajama bottoms with like my suit on top or my suit jacket on top. But for Meet the Firms, I went all out and I had my full professional attire on to get me in this sort of professional and confident mood. But aside from that, Meet the Firms is, at least for me, just one of those events that is meant to get you out of your comfort zone. You just have to get into that mentality from the very start and push yourself, even if it is just putting fancy pants on when you know no one will see them anyway. That little step is for you to give yourself a boost of confidence and get you into that professional headspace. And before the event, I also made sure to give myself enough time beforehand to get ready so that I wouldn't have to rush and stress myself out. And for me, taking that time for myself to get ready was very therapeutic, and it put me in the mood of like, okay, I'm taking the time to make myself look good right now and I'm going to kill it. But even before that, since you do get to sign up with professionals and you know who you're going to be speaking with and when, just be sure to do lots of research and essentially just plan your entire night out so you're not worried about the whole thing and you can just focus on your conversations with professionals. And like Gohar mentioned again, keep it conversational. Like I literally had a conversation about chocolate with one professional, and that's all we talked about for like the whole 30 minutes. And if you kind of feel like you don't know what to talk about, like a good icebreaker is to ask the professional how the event is going for them, like if it's their first time going to Meet the Firms virtually and how many students they're going to see. I think they really appreciate like kind of just asking how it's going for them. And you can really just talk about anything that kind of comes to mind. Again, like just having everything kind of planned ahead just really gives you time, or it just really gives you that peace of mind to be able to focus on the conversations that you're having rather than thinking about what's going to come next and being nervous about that.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing, Caroline. Now, just like the networking workshop event, it's a very good idea to keep in contact with professionals you have spoken with at Meet the Firms after the event. So, Caroline, would you like to touch on that subject?
With Meet the Firms being virtual, keeping in touch with professionals afterwards is essential. From my experience last semester, there isn't any way to share your resume with professionals like how you would in person. I know in person, like you would always print your resume on fancy paper and hand it to them. But with that in mind, you have to be sure to ask professionals for their emails and copy them down somewhere where you can keep it, because the chats go away once you're done speaking with that professional. So having something like a pre-prepared Excel sheet where you can just input the information as you go would be super helpful. In addition, also just take notes of the main points of the conversation you had with each professional so you can include it in your email to them and help jog their memory of who you are since they see so many students during the event. I always like to personalize my emails to professionals as much as possible to make myself stand out and be more memorable. And as I mentioned before, sharing your resume in your thank you emails is also the best option in the virtual environment. So when you send your emails, you can just mention that you've also attached your resume for their reference and be sure to actually attach it. I feel like for me, that was like a common mistake. I would say, oh, here's my resume, but then completely forget to actually attach it. But I would say like sharing it with them in a PDF format is probably the most universal and it won't ruin the formatting of your resume. So if you can, send it to them as a PDF. And another thing to keep in mind when sending emails, of course, is to thank the professionals for their time. And I mean, like, no matter how you feel the conversation went, it's like not make or break. And they still took the time to attend the event to meet with you. And Meet the Firms is most definitely not meant to be a one-off. So take the time to also try and schedule a virtual coffee chat with professionals you spoke with so you can get to know them even more, ask more questions, and strengthen those connections. And sometimes they don't reply to your emails But that's okay. It's always a good idea to try and follow up after a couple days to let them know you're interested in speaking with them again. It could just be that they meant to get back to you, but just got caught up with work, and sending that extra follow-up email will help remind them. But yeah, thank you emails are definitely essential for today's virtual environment. So be sure to get them out to professionals in a timely manner, proofread, and personalize them as much as possible.
Thank you for that input, and that was a very helpful information. Now, as the podcast is coming to an end, I want to thank you again, Gohar, for joining us today and answering questions AA students were curious about. I hope this information can get our listeners ready for the upcoming Meet the Firms. Please feel free to contact us with any questions at media@aaseason.org, or you can leave a comment down below. And don't forget to follow our YouTube channel, Facebook, and Instagram to hear more about the future events. Hope that you enjoyed today's podcast, and thank you so much for listening to us today. Thank you.